America in the 20s. Yeah. It was the jazz age and flapper era. Speakeasies and bathtub gins. It was ragtime. Al Jolson was filming the first talkie, The Jazz Singer, in blackface. It was the roaring 20s. The Charleston and the stock market that kept going up and up. And of course, there was the Savoy Ballroom in Chicago, a dance hall. The place, amazingly enough, where the Harlem Globetrotters were born.
Man, I knew them good, man. They was a hockey team, man. Yeah, from Canada. When you first get in there, everybody's like excited, you know. Like,
we're ready to begin the Tasted Green Thing.
Good for Jerry Neal.
Yes, that was that cat, all right.
Hi, I'm Louis Gossett Jr. We're going to tell you the story of one of the most incredible group of athletes and entertainers ever to perform in front of an audience, the Harlem Globetrotters. This is their story, a story of perseverance, of holding on to a dream, of believing in themselves and their abilities no matter what. It's the story of what's possible to accomplish in our country. The Harlem Globetrotters have become an American institution, our institution, because of the joy and laughter and athletic skills they have brought to millions of people all over the world for more than 6 decades. 6 decades of magic, all based on a dream. Come join me as we discover how this dream became the story of the Harlem Globetrotters. First of all, the Harlem Globetrotters, they weren't from Harlem. They were from Chicago, all of them. And they weren't Globetrotters right away either. It took them over 20 years to play outside the United States. It was all just an idea in the beginning. This little man, Abe Saperstein, 5'3", he started it. He called them Harlem because he wanted everybody to know that they were black. He believed in the abilities of black athletes. And black was unique then. The pro leagues were all white. And he called them Globetrotters so that people would think they played all over the world. Sort of promotion in the beginning. Their first date was in Hinckley, Illinois for $75. Each player got about $10 and Abe got about 20. These guys couldn't even get booked in Chicago in the beginning. Globetrotters? It took them over 20 years to get from Hinckley, Illinois to London, England. It was all a dream then, to be Globetrotters, a dream that started in the streets of Chicago. This is where Abe first got the idea for the Globetrotters, in a dance hall in America in the 1920s. Black basketball players performed in dance halls just like big bands, singers, dancers, and comedians. The floor was converted to a basketball court.
At halftime, they'd roll this piano out in the middle of the court, into the basketball, all the time. And I'd start singing. I'd sing songs to the audience. And always, it wound up with Minnie the Moocher. And I used to have them all singing, hidey high, hoity ho. The audience at the Savoy for the games were people who wanted to be entertained. And that was their entertainment. They loved it.
Abe had been hired to coach the Savoy Big Five. After a while, 3 of the players didn't think they were getting enough money and decided to quit. They wanted their own team. Abe, of course, wanted his own team. So he agreed. There was a reason that they wanted Abe. He was an athlete. In high school, he played basketball, baseball, and track. He was 5'3", a kid who grew up in an Irish and German neighborhood. He was tough. He had to be, and the players knew it. In the Savoy, Abe watched these big colored boys throw the ball around. He had seen them play in the streets of Chicago, and he was mesmerized by their ability. He knew the pro leagues wouldn't take them because they were black. But when he saw the crowd reaction, he believed he could start his own team. Abe was a dreamer. His dream was to have a pro team. That dream never stopped. He had to prove that he was right, and he had to prove it to a lot of people, including the team. Maybe it was their dream, too. Whatever it was no dream in the beginning. It was reality. And that reality would have broken anybody except Abe Saperstein and the Harlem Globetrotters. 5 guys and a coach, traveling in a Model T Ford through little towns in the Midwest. Towns that hadn't heard of them, and many towns that didn't want them. They traveled in the winter during the basketball season, and they made no money, really. Just enough to eat sometimes. But they played, and they played until they won. And then people began to know them. There were many nights that the team slept in the car. The local hotels wouldn't take them. They practically froze to death in that car. They had no heat. They would sleep together in blankets, 3 in the back and 2 in the front. Catch a few hours of sleep until they had to get up and drive to the next town. Once in North Dakota, it was about 30 below, and they couldn't find a place to sleep. Even the car was too cold. So they found an old black couple that let them sleep on the floor of their house. Another night in Montana, when the car couldn't get through a blizzard, they actually slept with sheep in a barn to keep warm. And these were the good times. The Depression hadn't even hit yet. The first team only had 5 players. That's all Abe could afford. Everybody else had 12 players or more. Night after night they played. No rest, no substitutes. Occasionally, Abe would go into the game, but that was no good. The crowd wanted to see black players. And while they wouldn't let them stay at their hotels or eat at their restaurants, they sure wanted to see them play.
Well, the players stayed with him through thick and thin, but I've got to make mention of this. This was in the early 30s, and these were depressing years. Don't lose sight of the fact that a dollar bill looked mighty, mighty big. You couldn't buy a job for for $100. And anything that smacked of $15 a week or more was something you had to grab onto. So the black players' future, if you could call it that, laid in the Globetrotters succeeding to some extent. So their paycheck could grow with the team. And it did.
Abe kept asking the players over and over to figure out a way to get some rest. They told him that the best way was to get some more players. That was impossible. There was just no money for more players. Abe even had to take a second job at a florist shop just to keep the team alive. The solution came one night in Iowa. It was freezing, and the gym had these pot-bellied stoves around the court. And one of the players, a guy named William Kid Oliver, let out a shriek and started running across the court with his pants on fire. It seemed that Kid had leaned into one of those stoves, caught fire, and with his shorts burning, raced across the court, ignoring the game. Well, the crowd loved it, and so did the players. They even got a few seconds of rest while one of them was burning up on the court. Abe now knew that the crowd would accept the Globetrotters fooling around, if it was funny. They didn't think the smoke coming off Kid Oliver's pants was real. Of course, Abe couldn't ask him to set himself on fire every night. The real solution came one night during the game when one of the players was dribbling the ball. The other team was trying like crazy to get the ball away from him. Of course, he wouldn't stand for it, so he put on a little dribbling exhibition. The other Globetrotters, finding themselves just standing around, decided to go over to the bench and sit down. The Globetrotter dribbling was now left out on the court alone with the entire other team trying to get the ball.
Look at him walking. This is what gives his teammates a chance to rest. Some of them don't even move.
When he was alone on the court, the crowd loved it. It became the first real Globetrotter routine. In fact, every routine that the Globetrotters created in the beginning years came out of the need to rest players. It's hard to say, looking back on it, whether those Depression years were terrible or wonderful. One time in Montana, they played in a drained swimming pool where the players ran uphill on one end and downhill on the other. Another time, during one game in Iowa, a player named Lester Johnson got pushed through an open window of a two-story barn, disappeared, and landed in a pile of manure. By 1938, the Depression was ending, and the Globetrotters had had a winning season. They now had 7 players and a little bigger car. The team was winning now, and even though they were still locked out of hotels and restaurants, they were developing a name, and they were making some money. Abe was always with them, and they believed even stronger that they had a chance now at making it. That was what they wanted, and that was what they were determined to get. It was because of their new reputation that the Globetrotters had to play even harder to win. No team was rolling over just because the Trotters came to town. There were a lot of teams out there in America who would have loved to beat the Trotters. But the talent of this all-black club was just too much for the competition. In the 1938-39 season, the Trotters won 138 games and had only 4 losses. And this record was made despite extreme fatigue and poor playing conditions. This particular team had some of the first legendary Globetrotter players. In the late 30s and 40s, if you wanted to see basketball elevated to an art form, you had to watch the Globetrotters. They were and became known as the magicians of basketball. All the great moves we see today in the NBA, the dunk, the passing, the dribbling, all of it started with the Globetrotters. On the road, traveling through America, the Trotters began to discover that they had no competition. Most of the time, they had to figure out how to keep down the scores against the local teams to get invited back the next year. And so, more and more showmanship and art began to replace serious basketball when the game was getting out of hand. In the beginning, the routines came out of the need to rest players. Now the routines were supposed to limit the embarrassment of their opponents. I mean, if you could not only beat them, but fool around against them, one would think that would embarrass them more. But for whatever reason it came about, the crowd absolutely loved the Globetrotters and their antics. In 1939, the Globetrotters entered basketball's World Championship for the first time. They beat every team they played to get to the finals, but lost to the eventual winners, the New York Renaissance, or the Wrens as they were popularly called. But in 1940, in Chicago, where they began their career, they had their revenge. They played and beat the Wrens and were crowned the world champions of basketball. Babe Presley, Sonny Boswell, Hillary Brown, Inman Jackson, Ted Strong, and Bernie Price. These were the world champions. In 1942, Saperstein signed the first player who would eventually become an international star and have a huge effect on the team's future, Goose Tatum. His nickname actually came from football, where he would leap up in the end zone and catch passes, and the crowd would say, "Look at that goose fly." With his 84-inch reach and great moves, he was a natural for basketball. The Goose became the consummate player. He was the Globetrotters' first great showman.
Goose Tatum takes a pass and then decides to run for a touchdown. That's traveling in basketball, loss of possession, so Tatum gently puts the ball down.
Goose is Goose, you know, and the man had long arms, you know, and he would put on a jacket that was a size, maybe a half a size too small, so he could show the long arms, and he had the big hands. And he had a little sweet hook shot that he shot around the basket. I believe that if we had to name the greatest comedic basketball ever, I believe it would be Goose Tatum.
In his spare time, Tatum would go to circuses and study the great clowns for new ideas. He took the art of being funny very seriously. His routines are the stuff of legends. One of his great acts occurred in Marseille, France. After being fouled hard by an opposing player, Goose went to sit on the bench to recuperate before going to the foul line. He picked up a ball on the bench, and he went to the line. But instead of shooting at the basket, he took a big bite out of the ball, chewed and swallowed it, then took another bite out of the ball. Tatum watched as the crowd of the players watched in disbelief, for he had gotten a local baker to make a dark bread in the shape of a basketball. That was the Goose. But World War II was in progress, and the Goose, along with most of the other Globetrotters, went off to serve their country. Only Bernie Price and Babe Presley remained during the first war years. 5 of 7 Globetrotters went to war. The war produced the first and last white player ever to play for the Globetrotters. Abe, during the war, conducted tryouts and invited the best players in the country, white or black. Bob Karstens was one of those players and signed on in 1942. The amazing thing about Karstens was that in addition to his basketball skills, he also had flair, showmanship, and inventiveness. He created their most famous routine, the magic circle warm-up, as well as the old goofball, a basketball fitted with an off-center weight that bounced in a crazy direction all over the court. Karstens lasted a season and a half till Goose Tatum returned from his tour of duty. By the end of the war, as the Globetrotters toured Army bases and played in Honolulu, they established a whole new group of fans, the armed services. During the war, the Trotters played 4 games in one day because they made a commitment to perform at a Navy base. They kept that commitment, and at the same time, set a world record that still stands for the most games played in one day by a professional team. After the war, the team added new players as well. It was this newly formed team that would go on to become, literally, the greatest team in the world. But not only did they beat the best in the world on pure ability, they were still able to entertain at the same time. Sweetwater Clifton, a giant of a man who would later star for the New York Knicks, joined the team. Sweetwater loved soda, therefore the name.
Sweetwater.
One of the players on this team truly became a legend of basketball. Marcus Haynes, the greatest dribbler of all time.
There he is, off on the dribble once more. How the crowd loves it.
There have been a lot of great ball handlers in the history of basketball, but Marcus was in a class by himself.
And what Marcus Haynes did out there, there was no one, even today, no one who could possibly come close to what Marcus does and what Marcus did at that time.
When you double team a great dribbler, you ordinarily stop him. But it took a whole team to guard Marcus, and even this didn't stop him. Note how the other players in the next shot are resting while he dribbles. Marcus Haynes could do things with a basketball that no one else even thought of doing. He could literally dribble the ball 3 times a second. He could bounce it between defenders' legs and retrieve it again, all in the same fluid motion. He could dribble on 1 knee or 2 knees. Here's a man who could slide across the floor on both knees, still controlling the ball in a dribble, who could do almost anything with a basketball.
Haynes is unquestionably one of the greatest all-around cagers in the game.
He started with the Globetrotters in 1946 and played till 1953, leaving the team after a disagreement with Saperstein, who had sold his contract to the Philadelphia Warriors of the NBA. Saperstein's idea was that Haynes would play for the Warriors and then return to the Globetrotters after the NBA season ended. Feeling that he was being peddled like a commodity, the great and proud Haynes quit and formed his own team, the Fabulous Magicians. But 19 years later, returned to the Trotters. By 1947, the Globetrotters were drawing large crowds and making serious money. After 20 years of struggle and hardship, there was no question that they had finally proven themselves. But with all their antics and clowning, there were many fans of the game that didn't take them seriously. How, they asked, would this bunch of jokers do against the NBA's Minneapolis Lakers, who had their own legends, George Mikan and Jim Pollard? To once and for all prove the abilities of the Trotters, a game was arranged and 17,000 fans came to Chicago Stadium in February 1948 to watch these 2 super teams. With a score of 59 all and almost no time left, Irma Robinson hit a shot from 50 feet out at the buzzer to win the game for the Trotters. The Trotters had proven to the world that they were indeed champions. Abe Saperstein had finally gotten what he wanted all along, the strongest basketball team in the world. If nothing else proved it, this second win did. This was not just a group of court jesters. This was a team that whipped the best the NBA had to offer. They were truly champions of the world. In the spring of 1950, the Globetrotters began the first of their annual World Series of basketball, playing the best all-American college players. Basketball was accepted as a major sport, and these were hard-fought games. In the first series, the Globetrotters won 11 and lost 7. And believe me, they were hard contested. No clowning around on the part of the Globetrotters. At the end of the first series, Arizin was named the most valuable player of the All-Americans, while Marcus Haynes received that honor on behalf of the Trotters. But another, more important event occurred in June of 1950, one that would have far-reaching ramifications. 3 years after the Brooklyn Dodgers broke the color barrier with Jackie Robinson, the NBA finally allowed a black basketball player into their league. The first black player ever to actually play in the NBA was Sweetwater Clifton, a former Globetrotter. The Celtics had selected a black player first, because the Knicks opened their season one night earlier than the Celtics. Sweetwater Clifton became the first black player ever to play in the NBA. And then, in that same remarkable year of 1950, two major events occurred. A song called Sweet Georgia Brown was heard on a jukebox by a friend of Abe's who thought it would be perfect for their Magic Circle routine. And that song has been their trademark ever since.
A great many people in the entertainment business, not necessarily the sports business, but the entertainment business, have a theme song. Here you've combined sports and entertainment, and people have streamed into the arena. They're sitting there with their popcorn and their peanuts and their soft drinks, and they're waiting in anticipation. The lights are up full, and then suddenly there's probably a subtle change. There's a little electric feel in the arena, and all of a sudden you hear, dun, 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 and you've got it. You know it's about to begin. That's the moment you've been waiting for.
Yes, that was that cat, all right.
Also, and to really launch the Trotters, Abe decided that if the Harlem Globetrotters were really what their name implied, they had better begin their travels. So, after about 23 years of being called the Globetrotters, they really became Globetrotters, and were accompanied always by Sweet Georgia Brown. Against the advice of practically everyone, Abe booked a playing tour of 3 areas that knew next to nothing about basketball: Western Europe, England, and North Africa. England, there they called the game netball, a game girls played. Western Europe, it was still reeling from the Second World War. Soccer was the game there. Northern Africa? Are you kidding, Mr. Saperstein? His business advisor said. But they took off anyway. When they arrived in London, not one reporter greeted them. The sports pages had nothing about them. They had drawn a 0. But wait a minute. This is no ordinary sports team. These are the Harlem Globetrotters.
There's a timeout call now.
An announcer told the crowd what was happening in that first game. But after a few minutes, the English went crazy over the team. They booed off the announcer, for the crowd didn't want anything to slow down the action.
Oh, I'm sorry. You have to get the water out of the bucket over there. We only got 1 cup over there. Well, I'm doing all the drinking over here. Not tonight, you're not. Give me the cup. Give me the cup, man. Give me the cup.
This is obviously a signal for something or other. What is in the bucket, I wonder? Oh, that was... Horses in the bedroom, he's back with another one.
This was no ordinary basketball game, no ordinary sporting event it was. Why, these black gents, I'll tell you, it's magical what they do. They come out with their little basketball, you know, what they dribble round the court, you know, and then they throw it one to the other, jumping one all over the other. I mean, it's just the most amazing thing you've ever seen. I mean, it's like dancing or something.
The Globetrotters became the toast of London, and the same reaction greeted them throughout Europe. Wild acclaim. The Europeans had never seen anything like this group of talented, joyous ball players. North Africa was next, and still more triumphs.
I think he's very famous for. Jerry Neal. Beautiful basket.
Rose was always with me in Europe, and I needed that because that was sort of like teamwork, too, having my wife there, you know, to be at my side, you know, whether I'm injured or playing, fulfilling these needs of the fans and fans' participation, and even just giving things back. A lot of times we would go out to different, we'd do a lot of charitable things. That's what I liked about the Globetrotters. We would always give.
By the time they returned to the U.S., the Globetrotters had made 73 appearances, and they were all smash hits. It was the beginning of an annual pilgrimage, a world tour. And later that year, they played to over 50,000 people in Rio de Janeiro. This was their first South American tour, and Newsweek magazine called their game a blend of comedy and class. In that same year, 1951, during their second tour of Europe, they played before the largest crowd ever to see a basketball game before or since. It took place in Berlin's Olympic Stadium before a crowd of 75,000 people. It was here, in this same stadium, 15 years before, that the Nazis had staged the 1936 Olympics. Hitler had regarded blacks as subhumans, and when Jesse Owens won his gold medals, Hitler stalked out of the stadium rather than to congratulate the great American athlete. But on this summer day in 1951, an Army helicopter landed on the field and outstepped Jesse Owens. After he circled the track once, the mayor of West Berlin greeted Jesse with the remark, 15 years ago on this field, Hitler refused to offer you his hand. Now, I give you both of mine. The crowd stood up, and the cheers were long and sustained. The Globetrotters were more than an American institution now. They belonged to the world. The smallest audience that the Globetrotters ever performed before was an audience of one. In 1952, when Pope Pius XII gave them an audience, he watched as 5 of the Globetrotters put on their famous magic circle routine, with Abe leading the other players in a rendition of Sweet Georgia Brown. In Tokyo, 2 million people lined up on the Ginza to greet them, and the opening night ball was thrown by the brother of Emperor Hirohito. All in all, in 1952, they had visited 58 cities and played before 1 million or more people. In that same year, 1952, Meadow George Lemon III, who was to become famous as Meadowlark Lemon, first saw the Globetrotters perform in Raleigh, North Carolina. Marcus Haynes, who was in charge of the unit, let Lemon try on a Globetrotters uniform. From then on, it was Meadowlark Lemon's dream to become part of this team.
I'm in the lineup with all of these people that I have been dreaming about. I watch Goose Tatum, the way he moved, and I watched Sweetwater Clifton with the big hands he had. Hey, I'm standing in this lineup, man, getting ready to be introduced. And finally, they got around to introducing Meadow Lemon from North Carolina. They had to have people to run outside of the building to hold it up, because those people were cheering so loud. The building started reeling and rocking. Went on like that for approximately 10 minutes.
He came on at the right time. By now, the team was in the entertainment business as well. And he was perfect in that capacity. Not as great a ball player as Goose Tatum or Marcus Haynes, to whom he's always compared. Meadowlark was a bundle of enthusiasm and worked very hard at being a clown and a crowd pleaser and an entertainer. Meadowlark Lemon was a handsome man with a sensitive face who transformed himself into the most appealing performer. He had a high-pitched voice which he used to perfection. He could be heard in the farthest reaches of the arena, chattering away all through the game.
Meadowlark was one of my favorites. I have to tell you that. Being in the Magic Circle with Meadowlark Lemon was a plus. And we had, at that particular time, 9 or 10 players on the team. And everybody wanted to be in the Magic Circle. But there could only be 5 players. So what I had to do is get my act together with ball handling and be able to do at least 5 or 6 antics, things that would stand out So what I used to do, I used to watch the other guys, what they did. I tried to better myself. I even do practice on new routines for myself too, and to get in that circle. And once you got in that circle and establish yourself, it'd be hard for you to get out.
I know he's gone, isn't he? He's gone, ain't right? Yeah, he's weird, right? He ain't another week. I got him, I see him. Move your hand.
He was loved by the crowd, especially the kids. On the court, he had a sunny disposition and always came across as a friendly, warm-hearted man. He would never turn down an autograph request, and the kids loved it. He was their favorite. There have been other great performers for the Globetrotters, but when they speak of the truly great clowns, it is always Goose Tatum and Meadowlark Lemon who are mentioned first. Although they've been on television many, many times, this is a team that is best known for performing live throughout America. And the rewards were the wild applause and laughter and the bright smiles of the greatest fans, children. Goose Tatum had always been an unpredictable man. As flamboyant as he was on the court, that's how quiet he was off the court. He was a loner. But the team respected his privacy. He'd disappear for unexplained reasons, miss flights and do strange and wild things. Then on March 15th, 1955, the Goose missed the team flight and never returned. He organized his own team, the Harlem Road Kings. But despite initial success, money troubles and bad luck plagued him for the rest of his life. Sick and heavily in debt, on January 18th, 1967, the magnificent clown breathed his last. The great Goose was gone, but his memory remains fresh in the millions of admirers he made, and in their hearts, he will remain immortal. By mid-1950s, the Globetrotters represented America in many ways. In 1956, the team arrived in Lima, Peru in the middle of a civil war and had to stay at the airport for their own safety. And when the opposing factions heard that the Globetrotters were in the city, they called a 4-day truce to watch them play and then resume the war. The Trotters were now crossing America, playing 7 nights a week. But not even this back-breaking pace would stop the Trotters from spreading their joy as far as they could. In 1957 and 1958, the team even added goodwill tours of Air Force bases during Christmas week without any profit to the Globetrotters. And they've been visiting bases where servicemen are stationed ever since, in the same spirit. But not only bases. The Globetrotters often go on Navy ships and perform for the troops on aircraft carriers, no matter what the weather conditions, no matter what the difficulty. The Globetrotters were certainly blessed with great athletes, but one of the greatest, and a legend in his own time, was Wilt Chamberlain. Abe actually outbid the NBA to get him. This was just the giant that Abe wanted. Not only was Chamberlain huge, he was a great basketball player. No one could stop Wilt the Stilt. One night, he scored 100 points in a game against the Knicks in the NBA, the only one ever to hit the century mark.
In 12 years that he played in the NBA, I don't believe there's anybody who has really come close. I know that some of his records have been broken, but they have been broken because of people who have hung around and played much longer than Wilt. But Wilt has, even today, I guess, more records that he has set than anybody. Nobody has come close, even with the three-point play of shooting 100 points in one game.
Wilt said that the 1 year he played with the team was the happiest year of his life. Chamberlain once pointed out that some of the routines were nothing more than a chance for a player to go into the stands and meet a pretty girl and get her phone number. When this happened, a fellow player would ask, "Did you drop the bomb on that girl yet?" referring to the getting of the lady's phone number. Even after he was a steady fixture with the NBA, he'd sometimes rejoin the Globetrotters on their summer tour. In the same year that Chamberlain played, the Russian government invited the Harlem Globetrotters to Moscow. They played 10 games in a week and conducted some basketball clinics for the Russian children. While there, they met Nikita Khrushchev, and that meeting made the front pages of newspapers all over the world, even though the Cold War was in full stride. Khrushchev tried to use the visit as a propaganda tool for the Russians by talking about the plight of the blacks in a bigoted America. When the Trotters returned home, they were met by newsreel cameras out to prove that Khrushchev's remarks were just another part of the big red lie. The sad reality was that there was truth in his words. Even with all their success here and throughout the world, the Globetrotters still faced racial barriers, especially in the South. Often the team couldn't stay at decent hotels, and in the small towns where there were no hotels for blacks, they still had to be put up at private homes. To make it clear how different it was, even in the 50s, there were times in the South that 2 games had to be played in the same town or city, one for the white audience and one for the black audience. The players, of course, didn't take this lying down. At a time when the civil rights movement was just getting underway, they refused to play in Alabama, Mississippi, and Georgia for several years. And in Jacksonville, Florida, they demanded to be put up in a white hotel. They were. And the next year, they were also eating in the hotel dining room. It was a small dent, but the Globetrotters kept pushing, as they always had, not just for their success, but for their dignity as men as well. And it was this dignity that finally overcame the roadblocks put up by bigots. Because of the success of their Russian trip, the State Department asked the Globetrotters to again go behind the Iron Curtain to visit Poland, Hungary, and Romania.
They know every trick of the trade. Concentrate on the man in the middle. Fantastic fun starring the Harlem Globetrotters. How about that?
After the Trotters played their last series against the All-American college players, Abe Saperstein wanted a franchise in the NBA. Although they had played and beaten NBA teams, the Trotters were never officially a part of the NBA.
The NBA wasn't what it is today. There were times that we had to play on many of the NBA cards so they could make it, because they weren't really making it at the time. We would play the main game, and they would have to play after we were there. I remember most of the times they would come out and, if they played last, they would come out and watch us do our thing first.
America in the 60s was going through great changes. The civil rights movement began to take form, pushing against the racial barriers in America, particularly in the South. The Globetrotters, with all their ability, after all, were not gods, but men with human feelings. Because of their travels in all parts of America, they, more than many others, had felt segregation's bitter lash. They may not have been in the forefront of the civil rights marches, but in their own way, by bringing joy and not resentment, they forced America to respect them as men. And for that, we owe them our respect. In the midst of those hectic times, the man who had dreamed of a pro team for over 40 years before, the man who had been the Globetrotters founder, owner, coach, and promoter, the man whose whole life had centered on this group of black athletes, became seriously ill and then passed away.
Abe wanted to see that game down on Long Beach. For what reason, I don't know. But I picked him up and took him and his wife, Sylvia, down to Long Beach. Now, Abe was so weak that I had to almost carry him. He wouldn't use crutches, but I had to get underneath his shoulder and almost half carry him into the stadium. But once the Trotters came out on the floor, it's just like he was reborn again. It was amazing. He was not that sick man at all. He was very well, and I don't think anyone laughed any harder at Long Beach Arena than Abe did.
On March 15th, 1966, Abe Saperstein died in Chicago of a heart attack, in the same city where his dream had first taken shape.
Every basketball player that's getting $1 million a year should go to his grave and take half of the money and give it to him. Really, because he was the one that did it.
Whenever one thinks of the Harlem Globetrotters and thinks of their brilliance, the joy, the tricks, their greatness, always in the back of that portrait stands a little man, no more than 5'3", a bit overweight, a bit rumpled, but with the heart and soul of a globetrotter. His dream had triumphed. Men pass away, but institutions remain. And that same season, for the first time in almost 10,000 games, they played before a group of kids in Harlem. It was the first time they played in the place they had been named for.
Probably one of the reasons kids love the Globetrotters is the Globetrotters are timeless children. They never age. They get into mischief. They fool you. They fly in the face of authority and get away with it. And they do their magic so beautifully, it looks like even I can do it. And you can identify with that if you're young.
The Globetrotters have had a place in America's heart for over 60 years. But it's been handicapped children who have benefited from the goodwill of the Globetrotters.
Part of their game plan is helping handicapped and disadvantaged youngsters through charity involvements and local hospital visits.
You getting your homework right in here?
Mm-hmm.
Good. That's the main thing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. What's my name again?
Geese.
All right. Okay. Don't forget that now.
All right, Geese.
Okay. Geese what?
What's his last name?
Their own struggle has not stilled their generosity. For who better than this team of black individuals understands the needs and aspirations of the underprivileged?
A lot of times we play against the handicapped kids in the wheelchairs, and they beat us. And I rejoice myself, too, seeing them win, because we've been so much of a winner, you know, during our years with the Globetrotters. But it just gives me a little time just to say thanks to those kids, the handicapped, the autistic children. We do a lot for those, the United Way, multiple sclerosis. We do all those type of things, and I guess that's what made the Globetrotters all over the years. We just give, and people is so receptive to us.
On December 6, 1974, they were received at the White House by President Gerald Ford to receive a special presidential citation for giving people around the world, quote, much more than basketball, but also the priceless gifts of love and laughter. In the late 70s and on into the 80s, in the spirit of true Globetrotter tradition, two new stars emerged, Curly Neal and Geese Osby.
You know, he brought a young man in by the name of Curly, you know, and it was no longer just me out there, became Curly and me and Curly.
Recognizing the Globetrotters' universal appeal, the image makers of Madison Avenue were eager to associate their products with the Globetrotters' family image. Here's what they did.
Have a Coke. Have a Coke, Coca-Cola, every time.
So welcome aboard the biggest, most luxurious plane in the sky, the 747, where you can move around with all the freedom in the world. Space like you've never known before. Headroom, legroom, elbow room. The Boeing 747, just like a luxury hotel. Next time you go anywhere, fly the 747. You'll have a ball. Boeing, getting people together.
that was that cat, all right.
In the tradition of innovation, the Globetrotters broke new ground in professional sports by signing on Lynette Woodard as the first female player.
I was very nervous the day that the selection was made. We went through a practice, and right after that, we were to get lined up, all the finalists, so that the selection could be made. And the announcer kept right on, and he said, "And now the First Lady." And he said, "And from the University of Kansas," and he called my name out. And I couldn't hear my name, so I started to look around, to find out who was from Kansas. And it hit me, I'm the one. And I just stepped out, and the joy that I felt was unbelievable.
She was the captain of the U.S. Olympic basketball team, which won the gold medal for our country in 1984. She was the first woman ever to compete against professional male athletes on an equal basis. And this woman could play. In 1986, International Broadcasting Company purchased the Globetrotters. Thomas Scallon Sr., president of IBC, clearly recognized that innovation as well as tradition are Globetrotter hallmarks and fully backed Lynette's inclusion on the team. The current team exemplifies both the innovation and tradition of the Harlem Globetrotters. It's hard to believe that over 60 years have passed since Abe Saperstein organized the team in Chicago. And in those 60 years, what a roll call of names and talent played for the Globetrotters. How can we ever forget? Goose Tatum.
Break the monotony. The Trotters try football technique. Goose Tatum takes a pass and then decides to run for a touchdown. That's traveling in basketball, loss of possession, so Tatum gently puts the ball down.
Sweetwater Clifton. Marcus Haynes. Meadowlark Lemon.
On the man in the middle. Fantastic Fun, starring the Harlem Globetrotters.
Wilt Chamberlain. Curly Neal. Geese Osby.
What's wrong? I'm hungry.
And as the present-day team begins its magic circle routine, as the music of Sweet Georgia Brown is heard, and as the excitement of the crowd's anticipation builds, we must remember a little man with his big dreams. Dreams that merge with those of 5 black athletes. Success, fame, adulation, and above all, the giving of joy and laughter followed them along the way. And America and the world have been its beneficiaries ever since. Thanking you for joining me in the story of an American institution, our institution, built on a dream that a very special group of people were determined to make come true.
I didn't know the game had started.
Yes, that was that cat, all right.